Hello everyone, and welcome back to RPG Horror Stories After Dark. I recently had a brand new game blow up and die in 2 sessions. The reason why the game is no longer happening is actually because of issues outside the game, but there was definitely a problem I think is worth the story time spanning multiple campaigns. I'll start with a little history. The most important actors in this play are me, the Dungeon Master, Kylie, a longtime friend and player, and Amy, best friend of 20 years, also a player. That's not their real names, of course. Yes, this was all in person, and with friends I've had since high school. Our first campaign was actually one with multiple DMs taking turns. This, of course, was awful and led to a lot of confusion, especially for a large table of at least half new players. On my nights to DM, I had the players attend a festival of love in a large town, saving one of my oldest characters from an unjust prison sentence. They all loved the story and grew attached to the NPCs I made. Eventually, we would have one player leave when I started bringing my boyfriend to games because my boyfriend and I are furries. This is probably an omen, as not long after Amy threw a massive fit revolving around the DM structure and left permanently. I put my foot down. I basically took over as a permanent DM because things were getting too confusing, and these first-time players deserve better. I continued off of the town I had them visit before and used my own lore and world from there. Turns out the town was celebrating the same festival again so soon, revealing that someone had put the town in a time loop, because at the end of the night, Wendigo-like beasts would emerge from the town's people's bodies and destroy everything in sight. The party was on the hunt for the cause in a globe-trotting adventure. When they finally figured out the curse, I created a twist where instead of traveling back to the town next session, they were now separated and part of the loop and had clearly failed as the attack was now in full gory swing. This got everyone going as they realized this loop would be their last. They did save the day, but it did get bloody. By the end of the story arc, the group wanted to continue hunting the evil cult that had caused it all. Then the year became 2020, and the game died super hard. 2022 included Amy again, who was itching for a new game, so I decided to run Strixhaven with my own spin. Some highlights included a botched production of Phantom of the Opera, the infinite plane of infinite beaches, and my take on a no-end creepy house type creepypasta, where a player was convinced she had a totally real sister that was definitely yes real, like Dawn from Buffy. A show I've never watched. What do you expect from me? The reason Strixhaven ended was because of a breakup between Kylie and their girlfriend, who was also now playing, and a major falling out with Amy that soured the whole thing. Essentially, Amy ended ties with my whole friend group randomly and took the vibe with her. I was devastated by losing a friend who was basically my twin.
Are you sure about that?
Seriously, like, that's happened to me. Once, with a friend I knew for 6 months. Someone ghosting you after a 20-year friendship? Was it, like, really random, or did something happen? Because, like, I mean, it doesn't seem very... I thought my days of DMing were over until Kylie basically begged me to do it again with a new group. Now, this is when it gets a little, a bit about Kylie really quick. In the first campaign, they'd show up drunk or with other guests who weren't playing, and they'd go to their room with their girlfriend like mid-game. For Strixhaven, though, they finally caught on, and they were now invested. Also, they decided to go by Kyle by this point. Kyle came to me with art of the character they wanted to make, with awesome trans goat man energy, with a cool wheelchair that seemingly had snakes for wheels. We talked a lot about the functionality of the snake chair and other clever magical tricks that Kyle could use to assist while traversing. It seemed very important to them since they recently started requiring a lot more use of similar accessibility aids. My whole thought was that I wanted Kyle to be able to live in this fantasy world as themselves on their terms and not to be punished by the game mechanics. The first red flag of this game was when Kyle took issue with my setting. I was essentially doing Witchlight Carnival Stranger Things style. They'd be in fantasy high school in a 90s setting, discovering the carnival causing strange happenings in town. I understood if someone didn't want to play underage and roleplay, but their reasoning that they didn't want to be held back from sexually charged roleplaying, that got me a little bit uncomfortable there. I hadn't really designed a world with sex in mind, as that's not very high on my D&D priority list. They almost made it sound like I was trying to set that kind of disturbing age situation up. The other players decided that an age up wouldn't hurt, but now my setting needs to be redone. But hey, I'll do it for my friends, no problem. Now post-college age, their characters went through the motions of the Witchlight opening chapter. A fun fade trick I pulled is that since the rich friend player character paid for all their tickets for the carnival, it technically meant the rest of the gang didn't, meaning they couldn't leave. Debating the rich girl as the ticket taker was hilarious, and eventually the story takes them into the Feywild. At this point, Kyle was going to extreme lengths to roleplay their disability. All the things we discussed in character creation, they were ignored. They were repeatedly nagging me for the accessibility of the Feywild, which I did not invent, and when I reminded them of their options that they came up with, they loudly proclaimed, well, that's not how it works in the real world. The rest of the session was tainted with this air of argument even after it was dropped. It was so odd to throw an argument at me that ableist players say to justify not letting players have wheelchairs, to justify them role-playing their chair being stuck in a swamp because they didn't want to use the aids they came up with, including a Misty Step amulet with 5 charges in it. Like Amy, Kyle eventually fell out of the friend group and took all the Witchlight players with them since they were all Kyle's family. I always put in back-breaking effort, but now I'm left with multiple exploded games because of various dramas, and I think I might be cursed. Perhaps I'll DM again. I have many more amazing and funny stories from those campaigns, and I want to be able to bring those kind of experiences to people, but this is a post-mortem, or just a rant. At least it wasn't an uninteresting stint as the group DM. I typically am a forever GM amongst my friends. One of my online acquaintances, who I've known for at least 5 years, reached out to me to join a Blade Runner one-shot of theirs. Since I knew them, I agreed. This person was an experienced game master, and we sometimes exchanged ideas and GM tips, so I trusted them. And that was a mistake. The first red flag was that I was in this game with 3 others, who I didn't know at all. No intros and no safety checklist to set up their game in session 0, which... When a game doesn't have a safety checklist, I do get a little anxious because I like knowing what's okay and not okay at the table with the other players. It's a standard in the games that I run, so this immediately gave me some bad vibes. Once we started the actual adventure, everyone seemed chill except one guy. He was an old friend of the Game Master's, so he was intentionally saying things to get under the Game Master's collar and annoy him, delaying the entire start of the campaign. He's saying that the GM doesn't know the mechanics or rules and intentionally gives us bad information just to make the game more difficult for the Game Master. This player laughed at it every time, like they were telling the best joke ever, and no one else was laughing. Rather than telling him to stop as it was making the table uncomfortable with all these awkward jabs, the GM just laughed it off because they're buds. It was one of those, oh you, dismissive hand waves every time. We had pre-made characters, and mine was a male replicant. I ended up getting paired with the GM's old friend, who had a character that was a human cop, who they decided hated replicants. When I say they hated replicants, I mean this player went out of their way to absolutely bully mine at every turn. If we had to fly somewhere, they would say they wish they weren't with me, or that I should unalive myself. They'd also roleplay moments where their character would finally be nice to mine if my character accomplished something noteworthy for the mission, and then immediately flip to, you don't deserve to have rights because you're not a person. A part of this is thematic to the setting of Blade Runner, of human versus replicant, and the question of morality and human rights, etc. But I feel like there's a line here. I tried to roll with it as best as I could, and I was really hoping that the GM could at least tell them to chill out, noting how I was getting quieter and quieter with every jab. Even other players were telling them to chill out, and instead the other player just laughed. The GM never did anything. I was frustrated and already anxious with the start of the game, so I just shut down. Thankfully, this game was online in a Discord call without cameras because I started crying. When it was my turn to do an action during our mission, I messaged the GM asking him if it was okay to skip me for a while, saying it was anxiety and that the character poking was getting to me. They understood, but did nothing to tell their friend to actually chill out. I wasn't going to say, hey, your friend's an asshole, can you tell him to stop the constant attacks? Because I didn't want to come off like I was personalizing the situation. I really tried not to, but when I don't know someone and they immediately choose to attach their character to mine solely to just hate on them, for no other discernible reason than to delight in my discomfort, it's hard not to personalize that a little bit. I likely would have been much better at brushing it off if this was a personal friend of mine. At least then I'd feel comfortable DMing them and asking them to chill. Thankfully, that adventure was literally 1 session long. I wouldn't have come back if it was split into 2. My character ended up resolving the big mystery at the end and doing the big heroic deed. Afterwards, I immediately left the Discord call, and anytime that GM asked if I want to join another game of theirs, I politely declined. It was a pretty awful feeling, and I was really disappointed that the Game Master didn't back me up or read the room enough to know that their buddy telling my character to unalive themselves might just be crossing a line. Hello, Crispy! I've been enjoying your content as it came highly recommended by a friend of mine. After joking to my friend I should share a particular story, they encouraged me to do so, so here it goes. I'm throwing my hat in the ring. I was the DM for a homebrew game a while back. I made plenty of mistakes. A lot of it was me struggling to transition to tabletop from a background of mostly forum roleplay, and I was a people pleaser, regular song of horror on your channel, so I owe some culpability of my own here. Ambitiously, the story was an amnesia plot. My players didn't strictly know their own backstories, but I encouraged them to choose from demographic information and draw the broad strokes themselves, to which I would fill in what I knew of the setting. This went off decently, and I had some fun regaling the tales of revelations, of cool capabilities, or secret mystery scars that the characters had. I decided a good way to tease what was to come was to have them go through a set of rooms, each themed after one of the 4 party members, and interact with specters from their past. One of them, let's call the player Tim, was confronted with a vision of their childhood self who was upset and lost. A different player, Jacob, was playing a very emotionally warm family man type character who predictably asked this scared little kid if they were okay. Tim immediately breaks character and berates Jacob for intruding on their moment, as if Jacob had hijacked the entire scene to their own benefit by simply being the guy who interacted. Now, being part of my culpability was that I was trying to do this in a text format, which meant the characters had rigid reply orders. Tim couldn't cut ahead of Jacob. That's probably a big part of it, but I thought it was completely unreasonable to demand every character just stand there with nothing to do during these fairly long segments, which were also supposed to be them learning about each other, especially when the exacerbating text format also slowed down the pace of a session to a crawl, even with 4 players. This grew into an argument that proved the canary in the coal mine, not just for the entire campaign, but also for my friendship with Tim, as they refused to back down, and kept demanding Jacob apologize for just role-playing. I'd be more inclined to blame just the format, but Tim had a pretty obvious pattern of hating when they couldn't dominate the conversation or interaction, or otherwise monopolize my attention. So I don't doubt they were doing the exact same thing in voice format. This didn't sour me off tabletop at all, though, and I've since had many wonderful experiences, including being recommended this channel, so yay! You have a great day. I'll get right into it. This is a story from 2024, and it was my first ever D&D campaign, 5th edition. I was 18 and had absolutely no clue how to play. Also, because of how long ago this was, forgive me if I get any details wrong. For all I know, I could be misremembering some things, so bear with me. This particular day, I went to a local game store, a simple and modest place where people would regularly play tabletop and video games. The store owner was and still is a pretty chill dude. One day, he happened to see me come in and told me that there would be a group for Dungeons & Dragons, since the new edition had been out for about 3 to 4 months, and I had become interested in D&D around that time, and he'd also gotten the player handbook for himself, telling me this much. He suggested I go talk to the Dungeon Master, who was already there waiting for his players. So, I did. The DM was rather nice, so I figured I would ask him about the details of the campaign. He had been running the Curse of Strahd campaign, with his own little twist added onto it for a while with this particular group of players, and stupidly asked if I wanted to be in on the fun. The reason I say stupidly is because I didn't really know at the time that bringing in a new player towards the end of a campaign was kind of a no-no, at least when I talked with some other D&D players years later about it, and they would say no, especially because of what ended up happening during this fateful day. I, being the dummy I was at the time, and completely clueless, said yes. I made my character a level 10 tiefling sorcerer, and a second person also showed interest as well. He made a level 10 tabaxi rogue, and I even helped him with drawing the character image on his sheet. The original players all eventually show up, and don't even question the DM's decision to bring myself and the tabaxi player in, and we all just got into the session. My memory of the lead up to what happens is foggy, but where things go awry is apparently find Strahd asleep in a coffin, casket, sarcophagus, I don't remember, and the players were as follows. A middle-aged man playing a paladin, a young woman playing a warrior with a bear familiar, a young man playing a barbarian, and me, and the tabaxi. We also had with us a vampire maid that was apparently betraying Strahd, and I just don't recall why. As we were entering the room, the dungeon master tells us we all have a small window to decide on anything we want to do, since Strahd was asleep, and the paladin spoke, asking their deity for some assistance. And the DM was obviously not thinking because he gave us 30 seconds of freeze time, and described the scene something like, as you enter, Strahd stirs and begins to sit up to demand the identities of those who dare to intrude upon his slumber. But right as he's about to scream, his body freezes in place. I had initiative, and I just shot him with a fireball. I don't remember all the logistics of my fireball spell, but apparently I had multiple meta magic and such, and wailed on this guy. Critting? The player after me was about to attack as well, when suddenly the DM got a look of horror on his face and yelled timeout so he could look through something on his end. That's when he realized his error. 30 seconds of freeze time equated to 5 turns, and I killed the guy. Everyone was stunned, and I also got a glare from the warrior girl who had pulled out a flaming sword for the battle and now was just unable to use it. Anyways, we now had to book it out of there because eventually the freeze was up. It also froze Strahd's minions. And we ran up to a tower on a balcony that apparently was over 800 feet in the air. Everyone started to try and think of a solution when I remembered I had feather fall and apparently can have up to 3 people falling with me. That's fake news. You can actually have 5 people falling with you. But who's keeping track? The tabaxi said that he would just climb down, obviously, but we didn't know what to do with this vampire maid. The others wanted to leave her, but I, being the goody two-shoes I was at the time, suggested putting her in a bag of holding that the paladin was carrying, asking the DM if vampires needed to breathe. He said he'd allow it, and I, the paladin, the warrior, and the fighter leapt off the tower. I had to wait for at least 200 feet or so before casting Featherfall, but it was successful. We landed safely and booked it away. I thought the campaign was over, but for some reason we continued after this, setting up camp for the night. We would all wake up to screaming in the middle of the night. For some reason, after we let the vampire maid out of the bag of holding, she started attacking the warrior. Gosh, I wonder who's to blame for that fiasco. So the warrior was being attacked because the vampire maid was hungry. Again, duh. And at that point, I said to hell with it and tried to cast Fireball to save the warrior. Nat 1. Okay, are you sure you're casting Fireball?
Please tell me you know the difference between a firebolt and a fireball.
One is...
Now, you would think it would have, I don't know, hit the warrior or something, or lit the tent on fire. We were inside of it. But no, it just hit her bear. I killed it. I killed her bear, her familiar, with my firebolt. The campaign was over after that. Pretty sure the warrior hated my guts, because if looks could kill. After all that, I am now a homebrew campaign creator myself, and I also made sure that if I ever want to be a DM one day, I would not allow last-minute players in. Things were rushed and unsatisfying all around thanks to that, and it just got worse. Here, these seasoned players were just trying to enjoy their campaign they had been working together on for a while, and I just came in, innocently saying yes, snatching all that work away. True, there can be some exceptions to these kind of things, but better be safe than sorry. Today, I have a story starring a DM who I really like playing with. Let's call them Hyperion. Now, they're a great DM, especially for how new they were. Great at balancing and pacing, giving everyone equal spotlights, considering feedback from their players. Honestly, I could sing all kinds of praises about them. Then, our last session happened. Very few characters are involved, so I'll mention them as the story goes on, since the characters, well, they don't really matter. Due to an incident causing our last campaign to completely crash, a whole other story, we switched to another homebrew campaign that Hyperion made. We didn't entirely have a session 0, but we were a friend group together and everyone already knew each other's limits, so please spare Crispy number 4 this one time. But it's still important for you to have a session 0 to at least make characters and see if you can intertwine your backstories. So sorry. Anyways, this session went pretty well. Some issues compared to the usual ones, though. I made a relatively mean character, fully intending for them to gradually open up, as being mean is their way of hiding how weak they think they are. We started a combat after setting off, and it just went poorly. My character, a rogue, felt like they were being watched, so I climbed up a tree to look for who may be watching the group. I rolled a 17 or 18 in perception, and I was just told, You feel like you're still being watched. And that's all. Our fighter taunted the enemies to come out, and they did. There was an enemy 5 feet away from my character. Like, come on, I understand if I can't see an enemy hiding in like another tree, but I couldn't see an enemy 5 feet away hiding in the exact same tree as me on a 17 roll. I just felt screwed over. We won the fight. My character nearly got killed and Callie rescued them, but that's where the session ended. We actually ended up talking about starting a little relationship between our two characters. That was an insane slow burn, but the DM turned it down, much to our disappointment. And then almost 3 weeks of waiting for our campaign later, Hyperion just dropped it. They said it was because they had too much on their plate and it was too busy for our campaign. Now, under any normal circumstances, I'd believe it. Last I heard, they were in 4 campaigns, DMing 2 of them, and used to be in 6 campaigns. So again, I would believe it. They bitten off more than they can chew with a 4th campaign if it wasn't for the fact that they started a brand new campaign with their main friend group. That's right, they started their 4th campaign with us and got us excited for a campaign they had planned, then started a 5th campaign with their main friend group, and we realized they couldn't handle it. Instead of dropping the campaign they didn't even have a first session for, they dropped ours entirely instead. That hurt. Hurt way more than it should have, really. Our campaign was the only event our friend group had to hang around with. We hung out over D&D for 8 or 9 months. I thought we were great friends, but they suddenly decided to pick favorites? They more or less ghosted us after saying they were canceling our campaign, rarely sending our group messages anymore. Hell, one of Hyperion's main group players messaged me and said that he had to get on Hyperion's ass to get them to even tell us. That's right, they didn't even plan to tell us that the campaign was canceled in the first place, so they could run their 4th campaign with their main friend group. All 4 campaigns they were in, all of them comprised mostly of their friend group. Our group was the only one that weren't the majority of his friends. So, yeah. Over the course of 1 session, our campaign started, thrived, then died because Hyperion, our DM, opted to play with their main friend instead of us, lying that it was for health reasons. As far as I know, we genuinely did nothing wrong. It was just a case of who they liked more. I'm the only one outside the main group that knows. Part of me wants to tell the others so they know the truth, but I'm afraid of it causing more issues and it leading back to me. I want them to know why the DM really dropped us, but I don't want to cause drama. There's nothing I can do about it, and it took the wind out of my sails. I plan to eventually look for another game to play, but all my motivation to play was pulled out of me because of this. You gotta tell them, alright? Let the truth set you free. If you cause drama with this guy, who cares? They're clearly not your friend, and you shouldn't need them to be. This group was comprised of a group of IRL friends, most of whom, except me, had known each other since they were kids. We were playtesting a world the DM had joined a team to develop and publish for. We had to save a princess from the big bad evil guy, retrieve the magical MacGuffin, and were promised a wish each if we succeeded. This setting had these kind of elements of attitude and behavior that were designated by color, and your behavior determined which element you were aligned with. I was playing a drow warlock with a homebrew patron who was an ancient god of blood sacrifice, so my drow had blood magic. Our DM was both a min-maximus and a rules lawyer, a literal rules lawyer, as in he is a paralegal with a specialization in policy analysis. So naturally the problems began at character creation. My character's backstory is that she had been seduced by a human sorcerer who, after separating her from her home and loved ones, treated her more like a pretty toy than a partner, and she finally escaped his household by resorting to blood magic. Needless to say, she was kind of a manifestation of my own trauma from an abusive relationship. He talked me out of making her an evil alignment because I don't know if that'll work out great in this party. In practice, no one tried to stop her when she did bad stuff, but okay. Then he tried to talk me out of giving her a metaphorical handicap, which was the literal source of her motivation. She basically had a cursed necklace the sorcerer put on her that made her automatically fail any rolls to resist being charmed. She wanted the wish spell to free her from it, so she could murder her crappy ex. During the campaign, DM had an NPC in the campaign try to break the necklace off and just cure her. He also gave her basically sunglasses, so she wouldn't have disadvantage in combat from sunlight. He had previously tried to talk a friend in another campaign out of making his character physically disabled after a brutal fight. DM tried to argue that magic would just grow the character's legs back, so the character wouldn't need prosthetics. It was a pattern of behavior which I, a person with both mental health and physical disability issues, found incredibly frustrating. The campaign itself was also frustrating, so I straight up just quit. It basically worked out that we were one of many groups that were trying to save the princess from the big bad evil guy and retrieve the magical MacGuffin, which imposed an artificial time limit because we wouldn't get the wishes if another team succeeded first. Multiple times, the party would go off to do a side quest, something we found narratively satisfying, such as the obligatory overthrow the corrupt government in one of the cities. The DM reminded us that we shouldn't be wasting time. We had to get back to getting those blessings for the wish. What is this about blessings, though? Well, to break the magical, force field or whatever, we had to run around all over the map to get strong enough to have blessings of each element, to the point where we needed 5 stars of each element's blessing to break the barrier. Already sounding painfully video gamey and gimmicky to you? Yeah, it gets worse. The elemental alignment system was so mercurial that your elemental alignment could change multiple times per session. The trials to get the blessings were also somehow even more gimmicky and railroady than the concept itself. There was an invisible glass maze that we had to get through, which is admittedly cool puzzle dungeon. Except we were informed that we would be cursed if we shattered a single pane of glass, because yes, if we didn't complete the challenge exactly as intended, we would not only not get the blessing, but could also be cursed too. One of the challenges was literally a marksmanship minigame from some kid's video game or another that one of the players quickly recognized. Not to mention, there were literal video game characters in the game, in addition to the video gaming mechanics and challenges. Rop, the random blitzball player from Final Fantasy X, was a powerful monk NPC. Torkar, the gladiator from Neopets, was one of the blessing challenge hosts. Yes, a freaking Neopets NPC called Jenny D. This was made for her. Now, I had tried to talk to the Dungeon Master about the video gaminess and railroading, as well as how the challenges punished unorthodox thinking multiple times. He asked for examples of how this was a video game, and straight up denied that was railroading because we could choose which the challenge we wanted to do for which element. After his refusal to budge despite multiple complaints, I eventually left the campaign entirely. I got a recap of how the campaign played out at the end. Turns out the characters didn't get the promised wishes anyway, because the wishes were required to defeat the big bad evil guy. Surprisingly, the story does have a happy ending though. I am still friends with the entire group, even though we haven't played D&D together in a long time, jobs and time zones. We had plenty of great and fun moments in this campaign and many other campaigns, and the DM's writing and overall TTRPG habits have improved a lot, and he has since encouraged me to bring my character back in future campaigns and give her a full character arc. Now, this is RPG in the most literal sense. I was a part of a 2-person text-based roleplay with a long-time quote-unquote friend of mine. We've known each other for over a decade, meeting in our high school years to roleplay between classes. He's a sweet guy, but we never really gelled since I broke off my 3-year relationship with him. It was nothing bad, I just came to the realization that I had grown up, and he had not. This shows up in his role-playing style, and I'll get into that. So the way our RPG works is that we both have characters, we both take turns GMing the environment for those characters. For example, if the character wants to go to a ball, he'll make the ballroom and the NPCs. My characters will interact with them, and so on and so forth. Dice rolls are at a minimum, more for decisions the other game master is on the fence about than proper skill checks. Anyway, the setting. It was loosely based on the premise of Undertale. The world is divided into humans and monsters. The monsters lost a terrible war against the humans and were trapped for generations until just recently. There were 7 human magi that trapped them behind a magic wall to spare them from being totally annihilated and gave up their own lives in the process. All this will be relevant. The first hiccup in storytelling was how he handled those mages. They were dead for centuries. One of them had been married to a nigh immortal monster, and this monster's whole character arc had been built about the grief around losing her. And then my friend decided to just bring them back, these magi, as monsters, all 7 of them, without checking with me as the co-DM. I maybe should have spoken up about how that trivialized a lot of the world building that he helped make, by the way, but I was curious to see where he was going with it, so I didn't protest. And he seemed like he was having fun. It was a very pick your battles kind of moment. These 7 mages quickly overshadowed the entire rest of the cast. They were the most important people. Off-screen, the king of monsters was told about their existence, their sacrifices, and gave them everything they needed, no questions asked, despite 400 years of knowing them as aggressors in a brutal war. The humans in the area didn't react to their presence any more than, oh wow, they're moving house now, in regards to one of their home bases. This is all after they showed up. My character bent over backwards and paid for their lodging out of her own pocket. She wasn't paid back for this. It wasn't even acknowledged, as if she wasn't there at all. Every scene after their unplanned revival seemed to entirely revolve around these guys or someone related to them coming back in some way. And I had different storylines I wanted to get to, like a hospital drama or a confrontation with the king. Initially, it was understandable things, like the Artificer Magi wanting to get involved with my doctor character's magic prosthetic project, or the one that had a dead wife wanting to sit in on her husband's magic training sessions with my character and that character's significant other. If it had just been little things like that, I wouldn't have had a problem with these mages. But then, it started to get more heavy-handed. The first instance was with the wife mage. In the years that she'd been dead, my character had basically been adopted by that mage's husband, which was why he was training my character in the first place. My character was attempting to learn how to make magic spells work, and in this universe, they manifest as shapes. For example, a healing spell literally shows up as a band-aid. This training session was the first the wife mage had ever sat in on, and the second interaction she'd had with my character since her Deus Ex Machina revival. Out of the blue, it decided that my character's magic will instead take the shape of her magic. Wife's magic makes apples, and now my character is making a bunch of apples, which, okay. I'm cool with coincidences, maybe this could be a reason for them to connect, except wife mage starts gushing about, oh, you take after your mother. Lady, I've met you twice. Twice, you say? Sorry. I've been K-pop brained. There's no recovering. My mentor has told me stories about this woman, sure, but I do not know you, and you definitely do not know me. And just because he's my dad doesn't automatically give you mom privileges over my 28-year-old character. You have to learn that with actual interaction, you find things in common with her. But whatever, I was a little miffed, but again, picking my battles. It wasn't enough to tear apart the entire story. Except things like that just kept on happening. I mentioned out of character that my character idolized the mage that was a healer, like a hero, since that mage had treated both humans and monsters during the war, and that was something really important to my character's motivations. Suddenly, the Game Master friend decided they should be her medical mentor. My character, who is already an accomplished surgeon at a hospital for monsters, learning medicine from someone who's been dead for 400 years. Then, my character had an interest in long-forgotten magic, so she goes to a wizard's place to study. The wizard starts getting touchy. Not in a weird way, more of an, I'm going to offer hugs and set my hand on your shoulder in comfort kind of way. That's a weird way to me, man. I don't know what you're talking about. But again, my character doesn't know her very well and generally shies away from physical contact for backstory reasons. My character is a human and had to disguise herself as a monster for years to avoid being killed by the Monster King. Wizard character then proceeds to take this extremely personally. I'm having my character duck out of the shoulder touch, and the wizard suddenly goes quiet before suggesting, here's your study material. You can leave and take them home with you if you don't like me enough to want to be around me. Like, dude, all I did was lean away from you with you being touchy. We have just met, and my character's been living undercover for almost 20 years, which she would get killed for if she ever got found out, and you know this. The worst offender, the straw that broke the camel's back, was this warlock character. When he'd been introduced, I had initially really liked him. He was suave, charismatic, knew how to approach basically any character who spoke to him with confidence. I thought he was a neat character concept and was more than willing to see where it went. The excitement did dull a bit, as he and his human-turned-monster mage buddies stole all the spotlight, but of the 7 mages, he was the one I liked the most. Remember though, his buddies are humans turned monsters. A veteran from the war between humans and monsters. That had ended in the near eradication of said monsters. The world is just starting to open up to the idea that these people can cohabitate. He should be acutely aware of how violent humans can be with monster aggression. Keep this in mind. I asked my friend what he wanted for this character, so I can help orchestrate it. He said he wanted the Warlock to get a foot in the criminal underground, so he can eventually take it over. I said, sure, I can work with that, and started setting it up. I made 2 characters, a human and a monster, who had recently been stiffed in the deal. See, monsters trade in gold, while humans trade in paper money like us real people. And ever since the monsters had been freed, it has been part of like an infinite money hack for people savvy enough with pawnbrokers. Except that the local government, realizing how quickly this was starting to spiral out of hand for the economy, had banned the exchange outside of official banks. These characters have been wanting to get in on the infinite money hack to pay for a higher standard of living and put their kids through school, so out of legal options, they turned to the underground to do it. They made a deal with a shady broker, paying him a certain amount per month for access to the ability to trade gold for what was actually worth in paper. But the broker had recently cut them out of it and stopped offering that service while still charging them the full amount. Insert the Warlock character. He'd overheard them talking in an alleyway and approached them, offering a deal with this guy if they worked for him instead. The 2 were kind of leery of it because, honestly, they were just normal guys who would dip their toes in the underground out of necessity, and this Warlock dude was giving them major loan shark vibes, but I can bend things a little to make the scene work, so he convinced them. I thought this is a great setup. He's a shoo-in for victory with both humans and monsters if he plays his cards right. He did not play his cards right. More like he brought checkers to the poker table and started playing it with their chips. This Warlock proceeded to go to the shady businessman that stiffed these 2, suggest that if this businessman doesn't give the business over to him immediately, there will be consequences. He is kicked out for being rude and threatening, then curses the businessman with eerie whispers in his ear, and takes away the guy's voice, making him thirsty enough to suffer, and shuts down all his means of communication as soon as he tries to use them, with the stipulation being, so long as you honor your deal, I'll break this curse. Mind you, this guy didn't even know why or how this guy had stiffed the other 2 yet. It was a rules lawyer technicality sort of situation, where he was technically giving them what they'd paid for, so this curse exit doesn't even make any sense. Warlock is behaving out of pocket, and the NPCs that were actually there, that were actually trying to do business, were now skeeved out of working with him. And the 2 he convinced to work with him are very hastily coming to the conclusion that this was a very bad idea. The cherry on top, this businessman is a human, and the Warlock is, by all appearances, a monster. He is being an aggressive, scary monster in the powder keg of hostility, which, if things continue down their course, would make the humans panic and start attacking all the monsters. Oh, but it gets worse. I quickly come to the realization that I have to have a mediator to tell him off in the middle of this self-righteous power trip so I can diffuse the situation before there's any kind of actual conflict in the story. So I have the businessman go to a friend of his next door, a fortune teller. She tries to talk some sense into Warlock, tells him basically, you can't just come in here and curse people you don't like and expect to be respected. Which his response is to start waxing poetic about how I didn't say I wanted his business. I just said he should give it up. And if this is the kind of establishment you run here, you know you'll be chasing away customers, right? And finally, all he had to do was honor his deal, which is just not an applicable thing here, with those 2 who are in the background panicking and trying to signal we're not associated with this guy, and he'll be fine. You know, he was saying this all to a criminal. Eventually, my mediator gets tired of this and tells him to just lift the damn curse or he's banned from the market. His response, I could attempt it, but if I did, it's very likely to jump to another person, and I would hate for there to be an innocent victim. So he has admitted that he's cursed a guy he didn't know the full story of, and that there are potential victims that could be caught in the crossfire of said curse, and he's acting like he knew this whole time and has a whole self-righteous attitude about it, like the businessman is the problem and not him. This is all with a curse he did not clear with me first. Not even a vague message of, hey, I'm gonna do something, watch this. I didn't even know the Warlock was capable of this super curse. He just made it up on the spot. Warlock naturally gets kicked out of the underground for this. GM friend says he's totally fine with it, but I've come to recognize the most fun I'm having with this campaign is when I'm just putting these characters down. So that's where I end it. I tell him I don't like the kind of person I've become while playing with him. He's sad about it, but he lets me leave. He tries to start a new roleplay with me immediately after, but I'm having none of it. This isn't the first time things like this have happened. His roleplay style just does not gel with mine. He has his characters profess eternal love within a message or a meeting or two. He inserts random ideas without checking if they're fine for the setting, or even if I want to deal with those ideas first, like putting vampires in Legend of Zelda as an established thing the princess can reference, and everything feels contrived with him. My greatest moments that I look back on with our sessions are ones where I purposefully withheld information so I could get a genuine reaction out of him, and not a metagamey, this is the end goal so everything conveniently goes towards it plotline. And I'm reminded again why I broke up with him, because I and my writing style grew up, and he just didn't. Hi Crispy, love the channel. I've been going through the backlog of videos. Something in one of them has a poorly made homebrew that reminded me of this situation. When I was younger, I was in a crappy homebrew game, a lot of them in fact. Back then, none of us really understood that we had TTRPG choices outside of DnD 3.5 and Call of Cthulhu. As a result, we tried to make our own non-fantasy games to fit us. So this system was pretty simplistic, in a bad way. Every character had to follow this specific point pool. You got +3, 1 + 2, and 2 + 1s. Your other stats would automatically be set to 0. The only dice we used was the d20, and you'd add up the appropriate stat to it. No base attack modifiers, no skills, just stats and a d20. However, there was one super important distinction. To make it fair, quote unquote, if 2 player characters were competing, the one with the higher modifier just won, no dice roll. This is going to be important for the story. We were all playing as assassins. We were sent out to this rival group of assassins before they did something. I cannot remember what they were doing. The plot was the least important part of this, which is embarrassing. All of our characters went by aliases, and our real names and identities were hidden from the rest of the party. Our cast is as follows: the Dungeon Master, and the problem in the story, prone to favoritism; Cue Ball, a strength-based female brawler, childhood friend of Bullseye; Bullseye, a dex-based male sharpshooter in love with Cue Ball, played by the DM's best friend; Songbird, intelligence-based, non-binary hacker. A hacker named Songbird. You know how to get into my heart. Not super important in the story, but they did not deserve what happened. Discount, my character, charisma-based master disguise and deception, actually one of the 2 different assassins under the name Discount. More details later. So we start out our mission, and right away, something is really off. The encounters aren't balanced. There wasn't any proper combat, it was more skill challenges. However, every challenge we got was just strength or dex based. So it was up to Cue Ball and Bullseye to do everything. Okay, sure, me and Songbird will get our time to shine later, and I guess we did, in the worst way possible. DM starts doing extra bonus sessions just for Cue Ball and Bullseye because he's really fascinated by their relationship, except he keeps canceling the normal sessions and just doing the bonus ones. There would be like 3 bonus sessions for every 1 normal session with all of us. And like, I get it, you like the characters, but I felt like Cue Ball and Bullseye had finished their arcs by the time Songbird and my character Discount were first starting theirs. However, around our 3rd big encounter with rival assassins, we just got our butts kicked. They managed to take Cue Ball hostage, and Bullseye is being really angsty about it. But hey, it gives Songbird some time in the spotlight, as they manage to track down where the rivals took Cue Ball. We get there, and the rivals have set up 2 buttons and 2 screens. On one screen is Cue Ball, and the other is Discount, except it's not. See, now I have to go into Discount's backstory. Forgive me for the edgy backstory, I was literally an edgy 16-year-old. Discount, real name Left, was raised alongside her twin sister, right, to become super assassins from birth. As a result, they were trained to be 2 bodies that shared the same mind, hence their shared codename, Discount, aka 2 for the price of 1. This idea was inspired by the movie The Prestige and Cassandra Cain from Batman, who I thought was like the coolest thing in the world. They have no real sense of identity at all, hence why they are masters of disguise. So they can take on another personality without their own opinions shining through. However, they were incredibly dependent on the other, being the only person who felt real to them. So Left was really struggling during this mission without her sister's support. But that's what I wanted. I wanted to see her grow, independent of her sister. I love themes of identity and the struggle to feel real. I told the DM when I explained her backstory that I did not want Wright to be involved in the plot at all, except here she was. Now there's a voice in the speaker telling us what to do. If we don't pick a button to kill one of these two people in 3 minutes, they'll both die. What do we do? Do we have Songbird hack it? Do we discuss what to do at all? Nope, because Bullseye immediately bolts to the button to kill Wright and save their partner and presses it. My character tries to stop them, but due to agility being a dex-based skill, and Bullseye having the highest dex in the party, by system rules, he automatically outspeeds her, and before she can even react, presses the button. We watch Wright get electrocuted, and Cue Ball is freed from her bindings. I could have attacked Bullseye. I think that was the DM's intention, but instead, Discount just completely shuts down. I explained she was no longer playable. She could no longer work in this group after what Bullseye did. I said I don't blame his player, he did what was in character for him. However, this should not have been a choice in the first damn place. Songbird's player took this chance to back out as well, saying they felt like they were set dressing to Cue Ball and Bullseye's adventure. So he left. I think the DM just ran the rest of the game without us. I didn't ask because thinking about the game kind of hurt. I felt betrayed by my own friends. I think this was the DM's attempt to get my character more involved in the plot, but having a character I asked explicitly not to show up, and then get murdered by a party member, I can't think of a worse way to involve my character. I'm still fairly new to tabletop role-playing games in general, only starting about 3-ish years ago. I've been playing a campaign that was made by my brother-in-law's wife for those 3 years. She was basically the one who started us in TTRPGs, as my wife and I have been wanting to get into it for a while now, but wasn't sure how since we both were very newbie and didn't want to ruin anyone's time with our constant questions or lack of experience. We're both very shy introverts, but her campaign has been great for the most part. I was playing a barbarian monk who came from a homebrew monastery I had created, as I had based him off Miroku from Inuyasha. I know how to pronounce that because of an NFT controversy. Don't ask me questions, okay? I don't even know the answers. There was also a splash of Master Roshi from the Dragon Ball series for good measure. My wife has been playing a changeling rogue bard, and her brother, the problem player, was playing a centaur barbarian. Now, like I said, it's been going fairly well, aside from my roles when it comes to anything getting my monk laid. He gets around a lot, which is kind of the point of his monastery, but I digress. Her brother, while super sweet and lots of fun, usually tends to take over things when it comes to the role-playing aspects. This was filtered down severely until our last session, when my monk, upon agreement between me and the Dungeon Master, was essentially put under a sleeping spell by the god he made a contract with before his blood curse took full control of him, which is a long story. So I brought out a new character, a high elf sociopath rogue, and her brother as well did the same under different but a similar situation. Her game is a homebrew one that has a lot of curses and tons of other fun stuff. The brother's new character, however, has reminded me of why I took a several-month hiatus from playing Dungeons & Dragons. His new character was described as being autistic and talks constantly regardless of whom the DM is talking to. I was barely able to get in a complete sentence, let alone any actual roleplay done without him interrupting or just butting into the conversation with some bubbly, adorable voice, even during serious moments. By the time we had played for about an hour, I was practically checked out and just listening while looking at my phone. We ended up stopping early because the electricity went out and we had to go get something from the store. I was talking to my wife and she felt the same way I did about her brother and thought the DM did as well. After we got back, we ended up talking to the DM and she said she was getting frustrated, but before she could say anything to him, my wife's brother admitted he thinks he went a little too far while playing and needs to rein it in some. He said he was just having fun, was excited to play this character, and went too far, and yeah, he did. Like I said, her brother is in general a good guy, and I love hanging out with him and playing with him. He just tends to drive over things or go way too far into the silly aspect, making it hard to have any sort of serious roleplay. Hey, nothing wrong with playing an autistic character, as long as you're not weird about it. I started to remember some of my first truly bad moments in Dungeons & Dragons, the infamous tournament arc. The important people in this story involve me, I was playing a blood hunter, Brick, the dungeon master, and most of the problem, Cheese, a player who was a major problem, he was a rogue, Diggs, my best friend, and another player who was the unfortunate recipient of Cheese's bullcrap. He was also playing a fighter. We defeated an unholy army of Gratzt. They consisted of vampires, werewolves, undead, demons, etc. What happened with Gratzt is a tale for another time because that was a bunch of crap too. But anyway, after this campaign-long saga, the gods decided to hold a grand tournament, and the winner gets a wish. We were hyped because the last tournament we did was pretty good, albeit one thing that happens that will be important later on. So with that, we were all off to the races, except here's where the problem starts. You see, we all had different patron gods. I had the god of knowledge, Cheese had the war god, I think, and Diggs had a god who was essentially a jester. What Brick did is that each god had their own team, so we had to make second characters, and Brick already decided on their personalities and class. Which, okay, I guess. Problem is, apparently, my partner was a dick, and I was starting to notice in the campaign I was becoming the punching bag for everyone, even Diggs at some points. But my solution to that was easy. Ignore and never talk to the character outside of just what I needed to do. After that, we learned the tournament was split up between these three segments. An obstacle course, capturing a god beast thing, and finally the actual tournament fighting itself. I don't remember why he did the obstacle thing. The god beasts gave the ability to skip a fight, which was very important for later. And then obviously the tournament was for a wish at the end. We start with the obstacle course, and I was the first one up. I don't remember the details of the course, but I do remember it took me an hour and a half to do. Then he went to Diggs' team, which took an hour, and then Cheese's team, where Cheese went, "Can I just do a couple of rolls and skip the narration?" To which Brick said yes, which was baffling as to why me and Diggs couldn't have just done that. But whatever, it's not the worst. The worst was the God Beast. A few things to know about Cheese and why I view him generally as a problem player. He was competitive. He liked the spotlight and he liked the PvP. So what's the first thing he does when he sees Diggs and his partner approaching? He orders his partner, who is some kind of overpowered god-tier gunslinger, to just shoot them. He instantly kills my friend's partner, killed Diggs too, and then killed me. When we confronted him about it, he just kind of shrugged it off and said it's not a big deal, until he realized that multiple people could get this key that skips the next fight. Not even mentioning the fact that Cheese was pestering and bothering Brick so bad. When I asked for a clarification of an on-screen character and what they did, Brick screamed at me. I don't remember what he said, but the move was instantly ruined. Though Cheese managed to calm him down, eventually two groups managed to get the key. Cheese and another character named Boss. One thing to know about Boss is that he's one of Brick's favorite characters. He's featured him in almost every campaign we did with the guy, or at least some version of him in the campaign. Boss was my second round fight, and it was essentially impossible to beat this DMPC. His patron god gave him and his partner infinite luck. I don't think I got a single hit in, and eventually just forfeited, which was infuriating to say the least, but not as bad as this. Diggs and Cheese's third fight was against each other because Boss used the key to skip Diggs. One thing to additionally note about problem player Cheese is he is afraid of my friend Diggs, and for good reason. You see, earlier in the campaign, Brick the DM gave us god tier weapons. Mine was okay, though it did give me some cool stuff. I don't remember Cheese's, but Diggs' weapon was a warhammer that constantly did over 200 damage. We got this when we're all level 5. Brick did encounters based on the hammer and the hammer alone. So Cheese wasn't excited about this. His solution? Cheat, and cheat so hard that my friend Diggs, he almost left. You see, the thing about his overpowered gunslinger partner was that their version of grit points could give them extra attacks, and I think they had enough levels in fighter to give them action surge. Cheese, in only a couple rounds, one-shotted both Diggs and his partner by rolling just 12 times. Well, that's entirely within the class features. Yes, if he bothered to even look at his dice, he somehow all 12 times rolled high, and half were interestingly natural 20s too. Diggs stormed off, and Cheese felt bad enough that he dropped out of the tournament and offered his overpowered partner to Diggs as a replacement. Diggs absolutely hated the partner when it eventually came down to him and the boss's team as the final fight. Him and Boss made a deal. He would throw the fight and the DMPC, Boss, would win. Which is where the first tournament story comes in, because Boss was involved in that too. We were after a god tier weapon in a different game, and this weapon? It was already in Boss's possession. He wanted us to fight in the tournament to get it. Long story short, he changed the deal, and now we had to lose the tournament to get it, which made me come to a conclusion. We would probably lose every tournament just because of Boss's presence, no matter what campaign, because even if we didn't agree to throw the fight, Boss would probably just win anyway. Diggs threw the fight by murdering his partner, and Boss killed Diggs, thus ending the whole tournament and any enjoyment from Brick's campaign going forward. There were some other notably bad stuff that happened in that campaign and others, but nonetheless, I had a lot of fun with Brick's campaign. He was my first DM, but this left sour taste in my mouth for a while, especially for his tournaments. Me and Diggs have both ran one small tournament out of our own in our own campaign since then, and hopefully one day I can shake the ick of it. Thanks for listening, or reading I should say. I hope this wasn't too long. The story takes place in World of Warcraft about 13 years ago. I first got into the game when my boyfriend, now ex, introduced me and got me into his guild. The guild was focused on raiding. It took me a long time to grind up to max level, but it was fun. I filled their needs for resource gathering and found my own farming routes for things that we needed for potions and pre-fight meals. Eventually, I got invited to Team B, and we set our sights on Deathwing, the worst fight in the freaking game. Okay. Weeks of strategy and grinding later, we had a good clear to wipe rate. Everything was going great, lots of loot to go around, however, not quite enough for me to keep up with everyone else's DPS. That's where the problems start. My main was really good at single target, but there were always fights with lots of ads, and I needed to peel off to deal with them, sacrificing my damage over time effects to help the team clear the field and reducing my overall DPS, which made me lag behind everyone else on the charts. Eventually, everyone but me had max level gear, and I was doing even less damage than them. This prompted a meeting with the raid team and guild leadership, which included my ex, and I was kicked from the group until I could get my numbers up. I resorted to just raiding with other groups to get the pieces I needed, and by the time I was up to par, things in leadership were already starting to go downhill. The guild leader had basically left the Vice in control of everything because she was never on. This locked us out of certain guild functions because only the leader could change them. Tensions spiraled into contempt, and raids became more tedious because everyone seemed angry all the damn time. There was never any talk about changing the leadership, even though that would make it easier for everyone. Even the Vice wasn't on as much anymore, and if it weren't for needing his permission to keep the guild functioning, it would have been a blessing. The Vice leader was quite the character. It felt like he used the excuse of being gay to prevent everyone from making jokes around him. Not just like gay jokes, like any jokes. Anything that could in any way be related to how he identified. Made a joke about just like a rainbow. Not allowed, the gay flag is a rainbow. It was that ridiculous. And no one judged him for his sexuality, or at least, look, I didn't. And no one did so when I was around. All the little things that were going wrong in the guild eventually led to a mass exodus, mainly the raid groups, and my ex formed his own guild, which also turned into a nightmare, and I only realized why after we stopped talking. The problem was my ex, this guy that I had put all my trust in and followed around like a puppy. He was the one talking to the leader to kick me out of the raid group. He was the one causing tensions to rise with the Vice leader. He was the one spreading all the damn drama. I dedicated my life to him, and he crapped on my efforts every chance he got. Being the guild led by him, it was a disaster. We almost never got a group together. I was still the only one farming resources, and we had far fewer professions among us to get materials. I did get really good at making profit off the marketplace, though. People always needed leather. Oh, man, you can tell this is past WoW. Holy crap. My love for this game has dwindled now, and the memory of playing is poisoned by the people I played with. Last raid I was super serious about was Thunder King, which was freaking amazing. I miss having that kind of community, though, and maybe I'll find an MMORPG I like more someday, but for now, it's mainly single player, and that's okay. New listener here, you're awesome and I love your content, so I've been inspired to share one of my RPG horror stories with you. Thank you, by the way. Sorry to do this, but I have more, and this by far was the worst. To start off, I'm a woman that had, at the time, almost a decade of tabletop role-playing game experience, and a few years ago, I had moved to a new state with my now ex. I didn't know anyone until I made a friend, Sam, at my new job. We bonded over our love for D&D, and he invited me to play at the local library that hosted Dungeons & Dragons on Saturdays. I met the other players, Bob, Nate, and Lloyd, some of whom I'm still friends with to this day, and then the Dungeon Master. The Dungeon Master had some weird vibes wafting off of him, but I shrugged it off as I was still building a social circle at the time. I built my character with my favorite class, Cleric. Sam played a Paladin, Bob played a Rune Knight fighter, Nate played a Rogue, and Lloyd played another fighter. Side note, Nate could only make it sometimes as he had to travel a pretty far distance to join the session. We started off as normal, most of us played our characters well, aside from Lloyd, who constantly had to be reminded of how and what to add to his attacks, but overall he's a good guy. But as the campaign progressed, I noticed that he kept eyeing me weirdly, which rubbed me the wrong way, and that he very much despised my friend Bob. He targeted him constantly with unbalanced encounters, which we shut down as a party. One of those encounters that really creeped me out was when we came across what looked like a little girl in a straitjacket, bouncing on a bed carefree, wanting to play with us. I don't remember what transpired when we approached, but she flung out the arms at us, her demeanor changing from a child to a more sultry, devilish vampire/succubus. I remember thinking that this DM plays too many JRPGs or watches certain animes with 1,000-year-old children. We did win the fight, but I swear, my hackles were raised, and I knew I had to leave or at least get away from the DM without raising too much of an alarm by this point. Another encounter we had later on when Nate wasn't playing. The Dungeon Master had us go through a dungeon and had thrown 5 intellect devourers against us 4. Memory's a bit fuzzy, but the main plot point here is that I, Sam, and Bob all failed our intelligence saves, dropping our intelligence to 1, leaving us practically zombies. And Lloyd realized this, tied us up in a rope line to take us back. The DM complained, "Are you guys gonna continue the session?" We adamantly argued that we couldn't. It would take weeks in game to restore our intelligence scores, and he grumbled to himself how we all decided to pack up to work on new characters. When we rejoined the following week, I did have a new character, a changeling fighter, Sam Warlock, Bob was a sorcerer, and we had a couple new players join too. Ash was playing a cleric, and Jay, another warlock. Lloyd kept his fighter. We did another dungeon crawl. The Dungeon Master was still targeting Bob, and now Sam too, as they'd voiced their concerns a lot more. We came across a section of the dungeon where there were multiple statues of people and started searching for loot. We had scoured every last bit when we were attacked by a Medusa, of course. I asked to roll a history on it, succeeding, knowing that looking into their eyes would turn you to stone. I yelled to the party and we proceeded to attack, clearly stating, "We're not looking into her eyes." DM has roll at disadvantage regardless, and I remember that on my last attack against the Medusa, they had pushed me away, and the DM described that as I was falling back, my eyes met with hers, and I was turned to stone. The party did finish them off without having a way to reverse the petrification, and the DM was like, "Well, why don't you look around?" stating that we had, and that there was nothing. He chatted with, "Well, over here, there's this potion you guys missed." It pissed us off since the library was about to close by the time we were packing up. At that time, I had mentioned to everyone that I wanted to run a D&D horror one-shot after I got back from a surgery for my health issues, mainly to undermine him so he wouldn't be able to prep that time. Secretly, my friends and I decided to pick it up and go to my friend's place. I blocked the DM and just never heard from him again. As another side note, I offered to have a session at my place for Christmas, and the Dungeon Master being the first to show. My puppy showed signs that he didn't like him as the Dungeon Master and was very weary about him. I just have a feeling the DM was planning on me being alone, but my boyfriend was there at the time and just didn't tell him about my puppy. I did later find out the DM was weird around those that were femme presenting, even those in high school. No wonder I was on edge, but nonetheless, I'm glad to have cut ties and my friends agree. Sorry for the long story, hopefully it was bearable, and I hope you have a good day. Hey, that's a wrap. If you guys watched the whole thing and you want to let me know that you were loyal to the tavern, then please do leave the comment, "not more favoritism," to let me know you made it to the end of the video. If you want to see more of our content, you can check out the last episode of After Dark, where we have another hour of horror for your enjoyment. But before you go, please leave a like on this one and subscribe to Crispy's Tavern so you don't miss any of our content when it comes out. And finally, if you want to support us directly and make these videos possible, then head down into the description down below where you will find our Patreon, where you will get exclusive homebrew content, an exclusive Discord server, and access to my home game. Link down in the description. In essence, like, comment, subscribe, support. I will see you all next time. Farewell.